it's gotten to the point, and this is another thing about, why do I like humor is that I don't like to watch the news anymore. I haven't watched the news and I can't tell you when.
Welcome to Creativity with Purpose, where we explore the stories, struggles, and sparks that shape our creative lives. I'm your host, Anne Murachek, author, healer, and believer in the power of meaningful expression. Together, we'll dive deep into what it means to create with heart, live with intention, and heal through the beauty of storytelling. I'm Anne Murachek, and this is Creativity with Purpose. I'm interviewing today our wonderful guest, Bill Williams. Bill started his career in West Texas, working his way through Texas Tech as a photographer and writer for the local newspaper. After graduation, he went to the University of Texas at Austin as director of both a four-city instructional television network and the university's four-channel instruction television system. While there, he also taught graduate-level TV courses and worked on a doctorate in mass communication. Bill then moved to Washington, D.C., where he started his own communications consulting firm. While in Washington, he was elected national president of the Independent Media Producers Association, and as a registered lobbyist, helped get several laws passed to help independent producers. Now he's publishing a book entitled 20 Years of Internet Humor and some other interesting things, based upon decades of sending out a thought for the day through the internet. Hi, Bill.
Hi, Ann. It's so nice to be with you this morning.
Oh, thank you so much. Your book reminds me of one of my favorite musicals, Singing in the Rain, and I just love the song Make 'Em Laugh. Was just for me a highlight. And so often if you take like these keynote speaker courses or anything like that, one of the things they always emphasize is how human laughter is, how uniquely human our ability to laugh is. And to break the ice and to communicate and to connect with each other through humor. And I think you're a master at that.
Well, I'd like to think so, but you can always learn more. As a matter of fact, I picked up a new book I hadn't seen before on salesmanship.
Oh, tell me.
And I was delighted to find out the very first chapter was Make Them Laugh.
There you go. I agree. Fantastic. So, I'm going to ask this. You got to share a funny with us.
Okay.
That's got to be how we start.
Well, it's one of these stories that it sort of attracts everybody. Jennifer and her little boy, Tommy, probably about 6 years old, were out shopping. And they came home from the grocery store and brought in the bag of groceries. And Timmy immediately took it into the kitchen and dug through it and started taking out everything, and finally pulled out a box of animal crackers. And he opened the box of animal crackers and spread it out all over the kitchen table. And she said, Timmy, what are you doing? And he said, well, when we bought the animal crackers, the box said, if the seal is broken, you can't eat them. And I'm looking for the seal.
That's darling. Very cute, very cute. Why did you send out, and to whom did you send out a thought for the day?
Well, this goes back to when the email and internet was first new. Everybody had it, but nobody really knew what to do with it. And I was managing a bunch of sales folks throughout the Midwest, and I'm trying to keep in touch. And they all had email because we gave it to them, but they never read it. So I needed to give them something to read. So I started sending out this something humorous, something inspirational, something to get them thinking. And it worked. They started reading their email. And even better, they started sharing some of the funny stories with their clients to make them laugh. Okay.
There you go.
Their sales went up, so that worked. And the client said, hey, could we get those too? So no postage on emails, so sure, add them to the list. And so I'm not with that company anymore, but 30 years later, I'm still sending out a thought for the day, Monday through Friday.
And I read them every day.
Thank you. I've got the folks all over the U.S. I've got people in Europe. I've got people in India. I've got people in Australia that are getting these things.
That's fun.
And I thought, I've got thousands of these things cluttering up my files. And I tried to sell it to some big publishers, and they said, no, it'll never sell. And I took it to another publisher, and they said, well, this would not make a good book. This would make a good series of books because you've got enough for
Oh,
10 or 12 volumes here.
uh-huh,
So this
uh-huh.
is plainly labeled Volume 1.
There you go. Wonderful. Wonderful. That's one of the things I'm looking at with My Best Friends Live in the Woods. We've just published chapter 44, but I have 85 chapters written and
That's a
continuing.
thick book.
Let's continue. To give you, it's kind of like I have 5 Harry Potter books in volume written right now. So obviously, when this goes to print, it's going to have to be chopped up into multiple books because no one's going to put a book this thick in front of a child.
In
Can you
front of
imagine
many
the
adults
eyes?
either. Yeah.
Right, right. Exactly. That's so fun. Well, I'm fascinated too by your extreme expertise in media and communications. And to go to humor is just so brilliant. I bet that helped you a lot in Washington to have a humorous side because that could be a pretty serious place.
Yeah, and I'm definitely glad I'm not there now.
Oh,
It's a whole different world now than it was when I left
yeah.
30 years ago.
Oh, well, sure. Everything is a whole different world than 30 years ago, right? I mean,
Washington in particular.
yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure. Yeah. What was it like lobbying there?
Well, it was totally different because as a lobbyist, we had to have ID cards, but we could, go into the office buildings and talk to people and do what we needed to do, and it was no problem. And now you have to have, almost an armed guard to go with you every place you go.
Wow.
I haven't been back in a couple of years, but even when I had been back on visits, it was, very, very, very much more somber.
Oh, right, right. So
It's
they,
a beautiful place, and for a tourist, it's a great thing to see all the opportunities. But
yeah.
if you're trying to work there, it's a whole different viewpoint.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. Yeah. It is part of it actually needing safety security,
Well,
or
with
is it more a
it,
political like
well, it's definitely safety because let's face it, it doesn't matter which party you belong to, you have people threatening the lives of virtually every elected official out there.
Oh, that's such a
And
shame.
it's not just the elected officials, it's the people who work for the government. You didn't do what I wanted you to do, so, you know,
Oh my gosh.
you know, they're even threatening judges and the judges' families. And
That's just nuts. You know, we need to let democracy work. We need to let free speech work.
well, it doesn't seem like that's very popular in Washington right now.
Oh, it's such a
You know,
shame.
because if
Yeah.
you don't agree with me, I'm going to stick the Justice Department on you.
Mm. You know, cooperation and communication, I think, are 2 words that our society needs to focus on. Maybe globally, we need to focus on cooperation and communication.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's gotten to the point, and this is another thing about, why do I like humor is that I don't like to watch the news anymore. I haven't watched the news and I can't tell you when because
Yeah, I
there's
agree.
nothing there that is enjoyable.
Right,
So,
right.
uh, I have the book that somebody can keep next to their bed and read the book to put them to sleep instead of scrolling, through these terrible stories on their websites.
And that's one of the things I actually talk about at Unpacking the Attic. I had traumatic childhood, was brought up in a dysfunctional family. I had a father who had a second family, multiple mistresses. The fights between my parents were intense and constant, as you can imagine. And I was an only child, uh, emotionally neglected, And so I used to fall asleep in tears a lot and
I
in
can
fear,
understand.
and covers over my head listening to this screaming and, this sort of thing for decades as I was growing up. And one of the things I have found peace in, and when in writing Unpacking the Attic as well, is that anytime those old recurring nightmares or those memories start to come back at me, rather than allowing myself to be triggered and emotionally react as the child, I try to say, okay, adult perspective, I am now safe. I am in my own home. I am no longer dependent on these people for my very existence, right? And I can relax, and I will concentrate and try to concentrate on something very delightful, something very
Mhm.
funny that has happened in my recent past. And I always try to fall asleep with that smile and that chuckle. And I try to marinate in that 8 hours of delight and humor. And I do believe that when we go to sleep, we can set an intention, and we can choose to direct our spirit to a higher vibrational plane of gratitude and joy, and choose not to be triggered by these old traumas. So I love your idea of keeping the book at the bedside, because that's basically my philosophy as well, is that we need to marinate in that 8 hours of joy, with the intent of having that full, restful, rejuvenating sleep that we all need. And there's no point in watching right before you go to bed something like the news, right?
Mm.
That I think humans aren't meant to be awash with this much information. I think we need to get back to focusing a little bit more on home and hearth, and not be so overwhelmed by the negativity that's being broadcast at us every day. I've even gone to unplugging my Wi-Fi at night so I don't have the EMF in the house. And I found that I sleep not only deeper, but more peacefully. And yeah, I don't know if you have a feeling on that, but how do you think humor affects your sleep?
It can prevent it. I mean, the lack of humor can prevent
Oh,
sleep.
the lack of humor. Yes, of course. I
Right.
thought you meant the
No,
humorous.
no, no, no. As soon as that came out of my mouth, I thought, that's backwards.
Rather funny. Good. Yeah, I agree. I think the lack of humor can just keep us up at night. And you know what? Here I am in St. Louis, right? I can't, by my fretting and losing a night's sleep, I cannot affect either positively or negatively the things I'm seeing on that screen. So why inflict that upon my spirit?
I totally agree with you.
Yeah.
You know, for somebody who made his living in newspapers and television for decades,
Yeah.
the fact that I don't subscribe to a newspaper other than our local weekly,
Uh-huh.
and don't watch TV news, which used to be my bread and butter, says, hey, there's something going on here.
Yeah, there's been a reversal. Yeah. I can remember wanting to see the human interest stories and the positive things that were always put on the end of our news. And I don't see that anymore either. We used to have such fun things. We had a man that would go around and interview different people. I was actually interviewed several times. One of the things you may or may not know about me is I had a 25-year career as a professional belly dancer.
Okay. I didn't see that on your resume.
Yeah, it's one of those, skip over that. I used to have music students would see me somewhere at a performance. My dance company was called Abla Rocks, and Abla is the Arabic word for mirror. We used to sell these little round mirrors on our costumes, and Rocks, RAQS, is the Arabic word for dance. So translated, the company was called Mirror Dance, Abla Rocks, and we performed a little bit different than most belly dance companies. We were educational, and we taught ancient Egyptian mythology and history. And I had written a book called uh, The Ancient Egyptian Legend of Scarabedal was Friendship Flies the Sun. And we used to perform that as an interactive children's theater production. So it was a little bit different twist. And we did performances like at the Missouri History Museum. We went to all the different schools. Most of the schools in St. Louis have an Egyptian like series of study. And so we would be invited in. I would sell copies of the book and sign it for the kids. Excuse me. And we would perform Friendship Flies the Sun, which talks about the legend of the scarab beetle and why he flies the sun and the moon and this sort of thing. But all of those experiences, I think, led me to a kind of a different perspective. I found that the dance was just a way to joyfully amplify the story, because the children came away really, really intensely remembering the teachings. They could tell you the story of the ancient Egyptians and what a scarab beetle was and why they worshipped it. And I used to teach the finger symbols that they called zills and the Arabic rhythmic patterns, and they really retained the knowledge because it was encased in this beautiful, fun, interactive, playful packaging, right? It was like all the dance and the costumes and getting the kids up on stage with us, all of these things sort of encased the teachings in a way that it's like sugarcoating the pill, right?
It's making learning fun.
Right.
And there's entirely too little of that going on these days.
Exactly. And I miss that. And I would be interviewed multiple times by our local TV networks at these different school events, or we used to perform at the Renaissance Fair and this sort of thing. And they were like these little fun feature human stories at the end of news broadcasts. And I was several times dancing with a sword on my head and playing with the kids, on these TV shows. And I miss that. I miss having that uplifting and that there is still joy in the world. There is still fun in the world.
Just have to look a lot deeper for it.
Yeah, I know. But do we? I mean, I don't think it's gone. I think we just have to have the heart and the spirit to not focus on the negativity. Perhaps?
Yeah, but what I see and the people that I talk to these days, just, the man on the street, there is so much anger. So many people are just furious about everything. Okay.
Oh,
And almost afraid to tell a joke in some circles,
oh my goodness.
I've had a couple of speaking engagements where, the anger in the people who were speaking before me was so intense that I got up and said, "Hey, before I get started, why don't everybody go get a cup of coffee, get a cookie, have a break, and then come back and I'll do my spiel."
Good for
And
you.
when you come back, it's a whole different thing.
Yeah, you needed the reset.
Right. And
Yes.
people don't even think about that anymore. It's just there is no reset. It just keeps going and going and going.
Yeah. Yeah. That's difficult. That's difficult. Um, Speaking of resets, I think your book would be perfect for that. I think everyone should have it on their coffee table. And every time they get that angst, they say, okay, I'm going to walk around the room, I'm going to eat a cookie, and I'm going to read a couple of pages.
And anytime you pick it up, you can turn to a different page and there's something new there. Nothing goes
Exactly.
more than a page or two, and some of it's half a page.
And I get your newsletter and I read your thoughts for the day and I hit share and I send them off to other people as well. And it's fun. It really is a good way to start before I pile into the to-do list of emails. It's a fun way to start.
And you get it when you wake up in the morning because I send it out overnight. Okay, so
Right.
you can start your day with a smile. And any of your readers or listeners or viewers can get it too. It doesn't cost a thing. Just sign up
Exactly.
at internet-humor.com.
Exactly. And we'll post that too in the more on the notes. So
Okay.
if you didn't get that, no worries. You can just go below to the more and I'll have it written out there for you. So very fun. What is the plan for volume two?
Plan for volume two is that I have it pretty well ready to go.
Oh, excellent.
It's people say, how did you pick the stories to go in it?
Yeah.
And I had all of these things here, and when I'm through with all of them, I can go back and do special editions on just aging, on just kids, on
Sure.
just religion,
Mhm.
special topics. But I'm thinking, how do I do this? And I thought, I'm going to pick a couple A's, a couple B's, a couple C's, a couple D's, and I went through the alphabet.
There you
And
go.
that's
Why
how these
not, right?
are. And the
Sure.
title for the first one is AAADD, for
Cute.
Age Activated Attention Deficit Disability.
That's cute. Very cute. Very cute. Oh my goodness. So I think that's a great idea to do volumes by specific interests.
After I get them all out there in
Mhm.
the middle, or
Yeah,
get through the system, and then we'll do those special volumes.
sure, sure. I think that's a really good idea. Well, this is going to keep you busy for a while, my dear.
Well, don't have much time, so I'm going to have to hurry it up. I
Oh, I
wasted all
know
my
that
time with these other
sincerely.
jobs.
Yeah, I know, I know. But you know what? No regrets, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, you made connections, you had a fascinating career. I'm sure you contributed much. And now it's time to turn the page and do something else, right?
Right.
Yeah. And that's
Absolutely.
it's really a lot of my journey as well. I feel like I have lived multiple lives already just in this body. The belly dance career, for example, was quite a chapter. But it was fun. It really was. And I felt like I was teaching and giving out information that the kids absolutely loved. I was enhancing their lives. And I had other dancers that, of course, I trained and worked with, and we performed together, and we became like a family.
Sure.
And, those relationships, even though all of us have kind of aged out of those costumes, is what I will say. No one wants to see a 60-year-old belly dancer, right? That's over. However, the relationships are still there. That connection when you have a shared experience over multiple years. For us, it was 25 years. That doesn't go away.
Oh,
Uh,
absolutely.
one of my principal dancers, her daughter is my godchild, and they come to the house every Friday, and I teach her. I teach both of them actually, mother and daughter, piano. So I still give private piano lessons in my studio, and those kind of things, those lasting relationships. I think that's the treasures that we find in life, and I'm sure you've built many of those.
Oh, indeed. Indeed. You know, growing up, I was a part of a military family and moved all over the country. And I went to 14 schools before I got out of high school.
Wow, that's like a record.
And I wouldn't trade anything for it, for all the experiences I had. But on the other hand, when I became a father, I thought I didn't want my kids to have that same experience
Uh-huh.
because I never was around friends. I didn't get to keep any friends because I moved away every 6 months or so.
You were always the new
And
kid.
yeah, and always the new kid.
Hmm.
And so that's why we moved to Ohio and I changed careers so where we could actually let my daughters have a hometown and grow up around nephews and aunts and uncles and that
Yeah.
sort of thing. And I don't regret it in a bit, but they've also had their chance to travel because I've taken them out on road trips and we went from Ohio out to California and visited all sorts of national parks and looked at some of the places I used to live and that sort of thing. So they've had their experiences too. and a couple of them have traveled more than I have overseas. So,
Uh-huh.
you know,
Uh-huh.
but it was an intelligent decision to, change lifestyle.
Exactly. And you know what? I agree with you with that because even though I've lived basically all my life in St. Louis, I was an only child in a huge generational gap between cousins. I had cousins that were already getting married and having their own babies, and I had cousins that were infants, and I was the only one in the middle. And so not only was I only an only child, but I was completely ignored at any kind of family gathering. The older ones didn't want to babysit me. They had their boyfriends and so forth. And then I can't relate to a newborn, right? You can't play or run and do things. So I was always alone in a crowd. And I think, though, the message that I learned during unpacking the attic, going through those past childhood experiences, was the value of inclusiveness and the value of feeling like you belong. And I think that's core to what you're saying, that sense of I'm
Belonging.
and I belong here, right? I never felt like I belonged in the family. I was always ignored, put aside to the extent that we would go to my father's older sister's home. She was quite a bit older than my dad, and she was the one that had the older children that were getting married. We would go there for Christmas Eve and have a big dinner, and then everyone would pile into the next room, and she had a Christmas tree set up with presents stacked all the way out halfway into the room. And all of the cousins would dive in, her 5 children and their boyfriends and their kids, but there was never, ever, ever a present with my name on it. I wasn't
Mm,
one of her children. Right?
mm.
I wasn't one of her grandchildren. I was the only niece.
Somebody else, the
I
outsider.
was the outsider. And I would go to the back of the room and sit on a bar stool in the back of the room and study the painting of the flamingo dancer she'd brought back from Spain while all of this squealing and package wrapping and opening up was going on. And I used to dream about the art I would buy someday in my own travels from walls of my own home, which I have done. My husband and I travel extensively, and I have no more wall space. I am paintings everywhere, and that's why. That's what started all of that. That desire to cover my own walls with my paintings from my own travels. But I learned from that how important it is to make everyone that comes to your home feel wanted and valued. And my thing now is I make ceramic Christmas tree ornaments. And so everyone that is invited to my home during the holidays, I create a handmade stoneware Christmas tree ornament and I fire it, glaze it. Their name is on the back, the year. And to do clay, you have to form it. It has to dry. You have to fire it to bisque. Then you have to glaze it. Then you have to fire it again. I mean, it's a multi-week thing. When they open that gift, not only do they know this is not some random thing I happen to have lying around that I wrapped up for them, their name's on it, right? They know that that is a gift of my intention and my time and my creative effort, that it took me weeks of thinking about them and appreciating them and wanting them to know that they're valued. So that's what my takeaway was from all of that was my gift is more long lasting. All the presents that were unwrapped under that tree have long been either outgrown or broken or discarded. But the gift I took home was knowing how intensely important it is to make everyone in your presence feel valued and appreciated and included. So sometimes the hard things we go through in childhood can bring us around as adults to a deeper understanding of things that we cherish and value. And I'm
Right.
sure that your constant moving as a child taught you some takeaways for your adult life.
No question about it. And as you were talking, one of the things that you do learn is what not to do as
Yes,
well as what to do.
yes, yes. Most of my childhood was that way. I always felt like I had my guiding spirits next to me going, that's not how you want to do it. That's not the way. That's not love based. That's fear based. And don't imitate that. And I always felt like I had my spirit guides, guardian angel, whatever you call it, right there by me, telling me, you're safe. I'm here. You're going to be okay. Someday you'll learn from this. Right now, I know it's hard, but, you know, understand that I'm here and I'm with you and it's going to be all right. And that's how I got through most of my childhood, was by saying, okay, that's how you don't do it. And I
Absolutely.
tried so hard when I raising my daughter to create a childhood that had magic in it, and wonder. And
Inclusiveness.
oh my goodness, yes, inclusiveness. And I was always the house that all the kids came to. All the parties were at our house. We always had snacks. We always had, the Christmas party or the New Year's Eve party or the 4th of July party or whatever it was, right? The birthday parties, everything was always at our house. We always had a house full of kids. And that was fabulous. Anna knew she could invite anybody anytime. And mommy would say, yes, absolutely. Bring them over. Yeah, I'll feed them. I'll throw another steak on the fire or whatever. You know what I'm saying? There was
Mhm.
always that welcoming open door at our house. And now she's raising my grandchildren that way too. She's the Girl Scout leader, and she's the house where everybody comes, and they have the pool parties, and and I think that was such a gift that I might have missed had I been in that pile of opening presents. Do you know what I'm saying?
Hmm.
I think I might have taken for granted and not understood how valuable that is.
Just putting it in other words,
Mhm.
your experiences gave you a lot of benefits that the people who didn't have those experiences have missed.
Yes,
Okay, so in many ways, you are the winner as opposed to the loser.
right.
It just depends on how you think about it,
It really is perspective.
you know? And that's the way I thought about, growing up. Well, I can't make any friends because I'll have to say goodbye to them in a couple weeks. But it gave me so much experience in making new friends and
Oh, wow.
meeting people, okay,
Right.
and trying to become a part of a group, even though it might be for a short time.
Mhm.
And so you just have to look at the positive side of things.
Yeah. Don't you think that that was invaluable in your lobbyist time?
Oh, no question about it.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because so many people have a fear of introducing themselves or meeting new people, and you were forced to get past that.
Well, and public speaking.
Yes.
It's commonly said that, public speaking is the only fear worse than death for most people. And one of the classes I taught was public speaking for college students,
Oh, excellent.
and
Yeah.
I thoroughly enjoy public speaking and doing presentations and do a
Yeah.
lot of them
Yeah.
uh, because, hey, I get to show off. Hey,
And who doesn't love the feeling of being applauded?
right.
That's right. I had a piano teacher when I was in grade school for many years in grade school. And she set me up for disaster this one time. I was in third grade when this happened. She dropped off a stack of music at my house, literally like a stack of music. And she said, I'm supposed to accompany the Girl Scouts at the junior high school in 2 hours. And I have a family emergency and I can't be there. You need to do it. I'm in third grade. And she had a paper clip on all the pages that I needed to play for this thing, right? I opened the music. It was decades ahead of my expertise. And not only could I not sight read it, I mean, it was like little bitty notes. My music had big notes. right? I mean, just the whole thing. But I was the compliant child. And so dutifully, my mother drove me up there to the junior high. And I had practiced for the 2 hours that I had. And I had gotten to where I could actually play the songs, but not real fast. So the first song starts, and I remember to this day, it was Frosty the Snowman. Poor Frosty's never been the same. And he had on rather big galoshes that morning. And I start with the little introduction, the thumpity thump thump, and it was really thumping, right? And the Girl Scout teacher looked at me and she looked at the choir, and then she started conducting like at the speed of light. And I couldn't keep up. I didn't even know what page she was on after a bit. And I suddenly turned around and I saw all these people staring at me because I wasn't playing. And I burst into tears and I ran out of the auditorium.
Mm.
And I was so mortified and so embarrassed. I ran up to the locker room in the school and hid, to the point that my mother couldn't even find me when she was trying to take me home. And I hid there for hours. And then I finally came out and someone found me and called my mom, and she came back and got me. She had actually driven home thinking I'd tried to walk home. I was just hiding. I was mortified. Well, from that moment on, I associated public performance with this terrible stage fright and humiliation. And it took me a long time to get over that and to realize, to back up and to quit triggering with that childhood emotional response, and to tell myself, you know what, that wasn't my fault. I did everything I could have possibly done at that age with my skill sets. I was set up for disaster. She had to have known, as my piano teacher, I'm a piano teacher now, I know what my students are capable of, that was over my head. And she selfishly pushed something onto me that she knew I couldn't achieve. So I have forgiven her, which has freed me from the anger and the resentment. She's long since passed on, but I held on to that anger and that resentment for a long time. In the process of forgiving her, I have freed myself. And now I have found a joy in sharing and in performing again. And I'm sure you know, on the YouTube channel, I have over 200 original piano compositions that I've recorded and put up online.
Wow, I had not seen those.
Yeah, so I do. My Best Friends Live in the Woods is my passion project, and it's the novel that I wrote about Albert Raccoon, who's adopted by Mother Skunk in the Enchanted Forest. And each story teaches mindfulness and compassion, again, in this fun, interactive, non-judgmental fairy tale universe, right, of the animals. So it's putting very serious teaching, bullying, compassion, living in community, communication, all of these deep things wrapped up in this delightful, enchanted forest with these little animal characters. So again, it's the sugar coating on the message, right, on the teaching message. But I compose original music that plays during my narration of all of these chapters, because the music goes straight to the soul. The music transcends the analytical and goes right to the emotion of the context, so that it informs the listener of the emotional underlying currents of what's being told, or what's happening. Well, the music has become such a major part of my life that I then took those songs out of the chapters, did nature videography, and strung them back to back to back to back in these long format music videos that run, some of them 2 hours.
Wow.
Yeah. So I think that creative expression, creativity with purpose, is something that we can apply in so many facets of our lives. So I learned not to be afraid and to repurpose that as a gift. I'm gifting the world, I'm gifting my audience with this love, with this beautiful music, with this emotional context. And I think when you focus on what do I have to gift, what am I giving, we get past the looking back at myself. because I think stage fright is you're afraid what other people are thinking of you. You're focused
Yes,
on you.
absolutely.
Is that one of the ways you frame your teaching for your college students on Spear public speaking?
Well, that was one of the ways, but you
Mhm.
also keep in mind that was 50 years ago that I was doing that because
This is
I
true.
haven't been teaching in college for a long time now.
This is true. This is
But
true.
your talk about music, I was always involved in music. Okay.
Oh,
And I
do
even
tell.
played professionally in a 40s style dance band in Washington, D.C. for a while.
Oh, what do you play?
Trombone, tuba,
Oh,
low brass. Okay.
fun.
And I always
Fun.
had a ball, but I was never able to improvise. And reading new music, I had to take it note by note by note by note. And I finally, as an adult, realized that I have a learning disability. I just can't look at a sheet of music and play it. I have to
Uh-huh.
take it, pay,
Yeah, yeah.
and I, s- I have given it up simply because I don't have enough time in the day. But I thoroughly enjoyed it
Right.
for probably 15 years.
Exactly. And those kind of experiences, just when the universe presents an opportunity, say yes. It's so enriching. It's so lovely. And these experiences don't have to last the duration of your lifetime. They're just an experience, right? It's like reading
Mhm.
a chapter, but then you turn the page and you go on to something new and something else that excites your soul.
And I can say I'm glad I did it.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. And I think that's the way we should all live our lives. I think if you follow your passion and you take it as far as it will go until that interest and that passion naturally begins to wane, then that's fine. You've explored that, you've learned from it, and then you move on to the next thing that excites your passion.
I've got to speak to that topic. Okay.
Okay.
I grew up on military bases, Air Force. Okay.
Yes.
Loved airplanes. Thought
Oh,
airplanes, I got my pilot's license in high school. Loved airplanes. I was going to be an
wonderful.
aeronautical engineer. Okay.
Okay.
And I got into college as an engineer. And about 6 months in, I realized that I really hate math.
Oh,
And well, so much for that. Let's move on to something else.
yes. I share that intense dislike of mathematics, mostly just because my brain doesn't work that way. I used to sit in front of my calculus homework with tears streaming down my face, and my father yell at me, "What do you not understand? There's nothing here not to understand." Of course, that didn't help, right? But because then I was like, I can't do this, and that reinforced that But anyway, yeah, that was never my strong suit. And one of the things that inspired me originally to major in theater voice was that there was no math requirements for the degree. Actually looked at that. That was one of my deciding factors for picking my original major.
Well, when I got out of engineering, I tried a little bit of this and a little bit of that and a little bit
Yeah,
of something else. And in my 5th year as an undergraduate, I was sitting in the union one day with a friend on the faculty.
yeah.
And he said, I was looking at your transcript and you have enough hours to graduate next semester. And I jumped up and grabbed him by the shirt collar and said, Great, in what? He said, If you take 3 more classes in speech, you can graduate as a speech major. And since the radio and broadcasting was part of the speech department and I was
Yeah.
already managing the radio station, I said, Oh, that's easy enough. I'll do that. I
Go.
became a speech major.
Wonderful. There you go. Yeah, I changed my major 2 weeks in to my degree. I had been in high school theater productions. I sang and danced at the Palace Show at Six Flags over Mid America. Um, I was convinced I was going to be on Broadway. I was going to be a theater voice major, and that was what I was going to do. So I auditioned the first week of school for the university's, I don't remember which opera it was, but an opera production they were putting on. And I got the lead. I got the lead role, which is unheard of as a freshman. And I was very excited. And I told everybody, I'm already the lead, in the school's opera production and so forth. And so we had our first rehearsal, which was fine. And I was learning the score. Excuse me, I got this cough. And the director put a key in my hand at the end of the first rehearsal. And I'm a freshman. I'm very innocent. I said, "Oh, do we have lockers?" And he says, "That's my apartment key." And he said, "You need to earn this role."
Okay.
So, what I should have done is take that key directly to the dean of the university, right? I was terrified. I handed it back to him and said, "Thank you so much, but unfortunately, I've changed majors and I'm just not going to have rehearsal time." And I walked out and I went straight to my concert and changed majors. So I switched to music theory composition. And thank goodness I did, because I've been composing ever since, and it's my soul's journey, and it's my expressive delight. It's where I find my bliss is in composing, and I'm so thrilled that I did that. But this was in let's see, it would have been in 1975. And how sad that even at the college level, that was expected of a young woman to advance in a career. And I thought, if it's this bad for a school play that really, there's no income, there's no, tangible resources that are going to come from this. It's just a school play. How bad is it at the professional level?
Bad.
Yeah. And I thought, that's not the life I want. It's just not I love I love the music. I love singing. I love all of that. But if there's this dark side that I was not aware of, that's just not where I want to be. And so I changed. I got my degrees, and that was a story in itself. But you've heard of the glass ceiling. Well, that even, especially for a woman in music composition, that was very much a real thing. When I was trying to get my my orals, my master's degree orals passed, I had two professors that were trying to block me from the degree. And my music composition professor found out about it, and he would spy on them. They were conspiring to ask me questions for my orals that were unanswerable and that were illegal questions. For a master's degree, all the questions have to be within your field of study. It has to be something that you actually had in a textbook, in your experience in that degree pursuit. So they were coming up with questions about university professors. Like, one of them was in Florida, and he'd written 2 or 3 symphonies, and they were going to ask me about his life. Well, that's not something that was anything that I would have had ever any exposure to. It was this remote university professor in Florida. Well, my advocate, who had been my private music composition teacher, used to call me on the phone and say, "Here's the next illegal question. Here's where you can find the answer. If you can't find it, I'll tell you the answer, but I'd prefer that you find the answer. Memorize the answer to this question." So the day of the master's orals comes, and they're asking me all these bizarre questions, and I know the answers, right? And they're completely dumbfounded. And I passed my orals. And Dr. Mantle and I went out and had a steak dinner afterwards. He was my buddy. But he said, if they're going to cheat, all I'm going to do is let you know the answers, right?
That's marvelous.
And so, even I graduated in 1979. Yeah. With my master's degree. I did a bachelor's and master's in 4 years, which is also unheard of.
Well, I had a minor problem with my master's, and I turned in my thesis, and it was rejected.
Oh.
And I went in and talked to my head of the department.
Sure.
I said, "Bill, I read your thesis, and it was absolutely marvelous, but it was too readable. It was too enjoyable. You need to take it back and make it as dull and dry as you possibly can. Otherwise, it won't pass." But here's your storytelling ability. You shouldn't be telling stories. You should just do statistics. So I went back and rewrote it and made it terrible, and they loved it.
Isn't that amazing? Wow. And if you had left it in its original form, it would have probably done so much good in the world because people would have read it and would have remembered the teachings again because contextually it was in this wonderful packaging. Yeah, what a shame. But yeah, it's interesting how, even when life throws obstacles, I could have just given up. I could have said, well, I guess women don't get master's degrees in music composition in 1979, right? I could have let that defeat me, but I did not.
I was going to
I
say, somehow knowing
found a
you, I
way.
can't imagine that would have been one of your possibilities.
No, it never occurred to me. Failure was not an option. It just simply never occurred to me. And I envisioned this goal, and I was going to do like flow like water, right? Around and down and through obstacles till I got to that goal. And I think that kind of visualization of your dream, of your end goal, and not allowing yourself to have failure as an option, I think that serves everyone in every pursuit. If you follow your passion and you creatively allow yourself to flow in and around these obstacles, you'll get there.
Mm-hmm.
You'll get there. And hopefully we can laugh along the way.
Oh, please, please. That makes it worthwhile.
It does. It does. And, cooperation and connection. Two big important things that we need to all extend the grace to each other for.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And this
Well,
has been a great conversation.
yes. And I want to ask you a question that I love asking everyone. To you, what is a fulfilled life?
Being able to get through the life and not thinking of anything serious that you say, I wish I had have done.
Excellent. So when the universe presents an opportunity, say yes.
Yes.
Yeah, I agree with that. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, Bill, thank you. I'm going to leave our audience with that. I think this was delightful, and I hopefully will talk to you again soon.
Very good. Thank you, Anne, so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
It's
It
been a
was fun.
marvelous opportunity. Have a great day.
You too.